in the interest of time, we'll get started. I'm sure a few people will join us as we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen Grozier from the JP Historical Society, and I just wanted to take a few minutes to tell you about some other events that we have coming up this spring, winter and spring. We have a talk or a book talk each month. So I'm just going to show you quickly that we have next month a talk about Evelyn Longman, who was a sculptor. She did a piece with Daniel Chester French that's at Forest Hills Cemetery. And we'll have Dana Pilson, who's from Chesterwood, which is Daniel Chester French's home out in the Berkshires, appearing via Zoom to tell us about Evelyn. And then in March, we're having a talk about uncovering the clues to your old house's history. That's with Sally Zimmerman, who is a JP resident and an all-around preservation historian extraordinaire. So that again will be by Zoom, and you can sign up. And then finally in April, we've got a book talk with Wayne M. Miller, who wrote a book called Burn, Boston, Burn, about arson in the Boston area. And there are some fires in JP that are featured there. So you can go to our website, jphs.org, and sign up for those events. And we may have a few others coming along. So if you want to, you can also, while at our website, sign up for our monthly newsletter. We will let you know what's going on about our events, other things that are of interest to people who are interested in Jamaica Plain history. You can follow our social media. We always write about our events, but also all sorts of other things. And you can also become a member if you so wish. We would love to have you as a member of the JP Historical Society if you aren't one yet. So just some logistics. You should have a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can use that to put in questions for Michael as he goes along. And then when he gets to the end of his talk, I'll be back and we'll answer as many questions as we have time for. So please feel free to use that Q&A button. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and tell you that Michael Reiskind is officially the vice president of the JP Historical Society, but we call him the historian. He is a treasurer of Jamaica Plain. He's one of the founding members of the JPHS, which is 35 years old this year. And he is going to talk to you about Green Street. So I'll see you all in a minute.
Hello. Glad to see all of you here by Zoom on a interesting industrial history of Green Street talk. This is going to be done sort of as a walking tour with lots of pictures. And the idea is for people to learn the history through the buildings. I've always thought that spirit of people who lived before in the buildings lives in the buildings, and you can feel them as you walk through there. So we're going to try to see if we can do this via Zoom. And I'm always happy to answer as many questions as you have, if I can. As I was researching this, it occurred to me that the theme here is that this section of Green Street was keeping up with the times. Most of the buildings were built before 1900 and were built to do jobs and functions at that time, but they progressed very interestingly from when they were first built to later technologies. And I hope you'll feel that when we do that. We're only going to talk about the eastern end of Green Street. That is the end of Green Street from the railroad Southwest Corridor, Green Street Station now, to Washington Street. The western end of Green Street from Center to the station, we do have a walking tour, and I hope you've done that. So let's get into it. A rather full documentation of industrial progress as we walk through the section of Green Street. Let's see if I can do this. Oops. Okay. All right. So this is the section we're going to be seeing. Washington Street runs vertically on your right. The railroad, as you see, runs vertically on your left. And the ST is Green Street from an old map, runs horizontally in the center. We'll be starting on the Washington Street side and moving to the left. And if you don't know, these buildings were done as insurance maps. So everything in pink or red is a brick building, and everything in yellow is a wooden building. And buildings that have a cross-hatched X in them are accessory buildings, stables, or garages, just so you can understand what's happening here. This whole area pretty much was rural farming and was owned by the Jackson family. Samuel and Daniel Jackson were brothers, and then in 1834, they sold most of this land to their sister, Betsy Jackson Green. She had married Abel Green. So Betsy and Abel Green own this land, and that's where we get Green Street, probably, most probably. In 1836, they sold much of the land to Henry Newman, and he sold it in 1842 to a Henry Codman. And Codman was married to the Amory family, and that's where we get Amory Street. So this ownership passed essentially from the Green family to the Amory family before it was broken down into these smaller lots. On the east side along Washington Street, there, starting about 1908, there was an elevated railway running over the street, now known as the Orange Line, before it moved to the other side. So on the east side along Washington Street, this area was bounded by a railroad running in the air. And on the west side, it was running by a railroad, also running in the air, as we'll see. Let's see if I have some slides of the elevated. So here's a picture of them building the railway. This is right at Green and Washington Street. You can see the holes being dug at pretty short intervals. Almost every house has a big hole being dug on both sides of the street. And here's the look at the elevated. People might remember this if they lived in the 60s and 70s and 80s in Jamaica Plain. You would drive on streetcar tracks a lot of the way on Washington Street under the L as it rumbled overhead. Here's another more dramatic view when it was painted blue and orange. As it started to fall down and drop bolts on people's cars, the MBTA wisely said, we're going to paint it to make it look better. And in a sign of community process, let the community decide what colors to paint it. There's another one, and you can see as it looms higher than the three deckers along Washington Street. Oh, and here's another one with a train passing over Doyle's, right at that little street in front is Meehan Street. So back to Washington Street. If you look carefully, I'm not sure if you can, you'll notice 30 or so parcels are owned by a Patrick Meehan, Meehan. So this might be the Patrick Meehan tour in a certain way. Patrick Meehan was a Irish immigrant, born in 1834, died in 1916, and he built and owned most of the land along here. He's not buried in Forest Hills, but close by in St. Joseph's in West Roxbury. And his home was on Washington Street, had a large house on Washington Street right at the corner of Union. Let's see if I have a map. Oh, there's a bad picture of him. I have not been able to find a better picture of this prominent Patrick Meehan. He owned 40 parcels of land in this area. Okay, here's his house. You can see Patrick Meehan, and you can see Union Avenue. Washington Street again is the vertical on the right, and Greenwood was renamed Kenton Road. So it's right opposite Hadoff's, sort of where the bleachers are for the English high school playing field. And if you look carefully at the corner of Union and Washington Street, you'll see an old wall, which might be a remnant of Patrick Meehan's estate. So it has a beautiful wooden house and a carriage house in the back. And there it is, another picture, the other with Washington Street the other way. And you can see a carriage house in the right rear along Union Avenue. And then you can see Stony Brook running on the other side of his property, and Union Avenue sort of follows the Stony Brook as it curves around. Our first building that we'll talk about, industrial, is actually a building slated to come down. It's actually on Washington Street. This building is 3368 Washington Street, presently owned by the Pine Street Inn, and they are going to build an extensive development with both affordable housing and housing for, I think it's called assisted housing. I'm not sure of that. Anyway, it's two parcels. Two separate types of housing for this building 3368. But it looks like an industrial building, and it was. It actually was an automobile factory. Oh, here's another picture from the other end of Washington Street. It was an automobile factory, as you can look at the map there, owned by Patrick Meehan. He owned the whole parcel with 3 brick buildings, including the one at the corner, apartment building, but 3368 is the middle one, and it was the Lennox car factory. As you can see on the bottom right, 3368 Washington Street is their address for the factory. 222 Elliott Street is downtown. That's Stewart Street now, I think. And it's the Motor Mart garage. So that was their showroom. That address is still in automotive use. Beautiful cars they made. $1,800, a good amount of money. I think I have another picture. Ooh, nice racer in racing stripes of a Lennox. And I think I have even a fancier Lennox. Oh, there it is. Yes. Beautiful, beautiful touring cars and racers built by Lennox and now presently used as a storage facility, that building for Pine Street Inn and soon to be housing. We'll come around the corner, first view of Green Street. This is Green Street with the elevated running along Washington Street, dominating the intersection. And that's Green Street Station, the original Green Street Station. You can see the canopy at the top right where people would stand. And these are 2 wooden buildings, probably predated the Civil War. They're modest. The wooden buildings, the wooden buildings predate the Civil War and are more modest in size than the brick buildings that came later. Yeah, on the other side of the street, oh, here's the same picture, same picture with the elevated taken down. You can actually see the Meehan built apartment building on the other side of Washington Street now. Not only did the elevated dominate the visual, but it dominated the oral, the sound of the area. You always knew when the elevated was passing by. Right next to it is the famous graffiti house, 197 Green Street, since demolished. This was probably owned by the Green family. and might have been their residence. I can't remember. There's an extensive history of it written by Jenny Nathans of the Historical Society on it. Here's another view of the graffiti house before it was torn down. Let's jump to the other side of the street for some other wooden modest buildings. Directly across the street, there is a 3-decker, and behind it is a very interesting wooden single-family house with a double gable and sort of dormers coming out of the double gable. This is one of 3 houses built almost exactly the same along this section of Center Street, and they're 192, 194, and 196 Green Street, built by Joseph Fernald, probably a French-Canadian builder. You'll hear a lot of immigrant names, either French Canadian, Irish, or German names over and over again. This, of course, was an immigrant area, and Patrick Meehan, even though he was the dominant landlord, was an Irish immigrant. Let's see if I have another picture of the other 2 houses, and you'll see how similar they are. Okay, they are right there again with the double gables. So this is 192 and 194. 196 had been closer to the street, but was physically moved back in order to build that 3-decker that we saw on the same lot. So yeah, these are the lovely 3 Joseph Fernald wooden houses. If we jump to the other side of the street, we come upon 2 of the most prominent brick buildings that define this street. These are 2 so-called hotels built as apartment blocks, probably not as hotels, although they might have had some short-term apartment use for people coming from the railroad at Green Street Station, named at that time Jamaica Plain Station, of course. So they are, the one on the left actually is numbered as a Union Avenue address on the corner. Let's see if I have a closer view of it. Oh yeah, here we'll go onto the maps, and you can see Union Avenue splits the 2 large brick buildings, and they are named Hotel McKinley on the left and Hotel Morse on the right. Built by Patrick Meehan, and very, very prominent. I think they really define the building. Okay. Here's the Hotel McKinley. Let's see if I have a more close-up. Yes, Hotel McKinley with the on view. Now they look symmetric, and they're called symmetric, but if you look very carefully, they are not. Neither of the buildings is quite symmetric in the ways it first appears. You'll see that they have nice blind arches, brick arches along the top on the 4 stories. But they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paired arched windows, and they should be symmetric, but they're not. The 4 on the left are symmetric, wide, narrow, narrow, wide, and then there's a 5th one which is neither wide nor narrow. Very odd, but the building works as a beautiful, nice, calm building. It's got a prominent cornice. That's that roof, hanging roof, and it's got another cornice line between the 3rd and 4th stories. These were built, as I said, as apartment hotels, or apartments, or short-term hotel stay for people coming to visit people in the neighborhood. The one on the left, Hotel McKinley, named after the president. Evidently, he did come to visit Mr. Patrick Meehan, the builder, while it was being built, so he said he'd name it after him. And now it's they're both used for as lodging houses. The new phrase in the city of Boston is single room occupancy, or SROs. So these are still same use, lodging houses. Okay, now we're looking down Union Avenue with Hotel McKinley on the left and Hotel Morris on the right. And you'll notice Hotel Morris is not matching, even though it looks 4 stories. There's something a little odd about it. It's got the same fluted columns on the left and right at the corner, beautiful little fluted columns, the same coloring, the same type of bricks, but the Hotel Morris on the right is almost twice as large. You can see how far back it extends. And if you look carefully, the windows don't quite line up on the Hotel Morris, and it's built almost as 2 buildings in an asymmetric style. Oops. Oh, sorry. I forgot the Hotel McKinley is still has a plaque over the between the second and third floors. Okay, here's the Hotel Morris, looking nice. It is symmetric from the front. 2, 4, 7, 9. Yeah, 9 windows, nicely symmetric, and nice panel brick ornamentation. But as I said, oh yeah, and it says Hotel Morris, just like the Hotel McKinley, between the second and third floors. And then you can see the lovely panel brick ornamentation below each of the windows. But as I say, if you go around the corner, the windows don't quite line up. And you look at it again, it's got a prominent entrance on the Union Avenue side. And here is the break. The windows really don't line up at all. It's very odd, and it seems to still work. And then I think I have a close-up of the lovely ornamentation, and it's different. Every second window has a different type of ornamentation. Really beautiful use of brick. And then granite sills, that is the bottom horizontal piece under the window, is granite, and the lintel on the top is also granite above the horizontal piece at the top of the window. It's also granite. Beautiful. Let's jump to across the street. You'll notice the Joseph Fernald house on the right, but on the left, a prominent brick building. This is the Joseph Papineau livery stable, now used as a supermarket. I think I have another picture of it. Yeah, here, lovely 3-story or so-called 2.5-story mansard livery stable, and nice, symmetric, balanced, beautiful building. But it's got an odd asymmetry. It's got a lot of additions along the back. So if you look at the to the right there, that garage space is also part of the building. It was added on to, and then there was a garage added on even further along the back there. I think I have an old picture when it was called. Oh yes, here's the map when it says it was a livery, and then it says there was a hall on the 3rd floor. That was the mansard roof, and my guess it was called Bachelor's Hall. I've found some documentation of meetings being held at Bachelor's Hall on Green Street, and this is the only hall I've seen documented. So Bachelor's Hall on the 3rd floor, and the livery stable, probably with horses on the 1st floor. And now you can see to the right the addition, wooden addition, and then a brick addition leading on to the back. If you look carefully in the center, at the corner of what's called Alden Place, now renamed Greenlee. You can see that the Papineau building is definitely L-shaped with a wooden shed in the corner of the L. So a lot being added on to this building. And then if you look around to the back, you can read it had a later use as a plumbing supply store called Monroe Plumbing. And if you look carefully, the ghost letters at the rear still say Monroe. And you can see heating and plumbing, I think. Anyway, I can read Monroe and heating. Still there, pretty prominently in a good sun. To the left of it is 172 Green Street, which was built as a carriage factory and other uses. Probably just a showroom on the first floor, but a beautiful arched series of arched buildings, windows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 across the front, and along the side, I think there are 7 columns of windows. I think there is a picture of it from an old, here's another front view. Beautiful, beautiful view of the Meehan carriage factory. Again, Patrick Meehan. And it again seems symmetric and balanced, but the entrance is not in the center. The entrance is over to the right, but it seems to work in both views. Let me see if I can go back. Yeah, you can see the entrance to the right there. Again, asymmetric. There's all kinds of interesting asymmetries in these buildings, but they feel balanced. Let's see if I have a picture of that. Oh, here's where it is again on the map, and it's says Patrick Meehan ownership. Here's a drawing of both buildings, the Papineau livery stable on the right and the carriage factory on the left. It was rented out to Alfred Tanisch, a local German-American carriage maker who has the factory actually around the corner. He might have needed expansion space or showroom space, but we'll see Mr. Tanisch's more modest carriage factory in a second, but a beautiful. Again, you'll notice six arched rows of windows, six columns of windows along the front. And the artist has actually made a mistake and put 8 columns of windows along the left side. As we saw, there were only 7. Slight mistake in the drawing. And here's their uses: livery stable and hall on the right, and carriage shop on the first floor. It was an incandescent lamp manufacturer on both the second and third floors, and it was a silk weaving, silk weaving on the fourth floor. Interesting use of space at that point. Both these buildings had later uses, and they became they were merged into the National Packaging Machinery Company. And you'll notice it says 194 Green Street at the bottom there. So there was a corrugated boxes and packaging machinery were there in both buildings in the later use. And you can say, well, you can't make much money on corrugated boxes and stuff, but if you look carefully, they have branch offices in New York, Cleveland, and Chicago, with their main office in Jamaica Plain. And you can make money with packaging machinery. In fact, one of the richest men in New England, Robert Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, his main business is packaging of corrugated boxes. Rand Whitney Company and International Forest Products. It's the largest packaging machinery, paper and packaging machinery privately owned in the country. Moving on to the left of the 172 Green Street, you see a brick building set back, and its address is 172R, as opposed to 172, the carriage factory that we've just visited. And 172R is an odd shaped, you can see it extends to the back and diagonally. I think I have a map of it, and it's, there it is. In an earlier map, you can see 172 marked was as a brick, with a brick X on the back of the Brookside Avenue building. But I think there's a later map. Oh yes, here's the current map, adjusted so Green Street lies along the bottom, Brookside along the left, and you can see it's a separate parcel, but an odd shaped, looks like it's attached to both 128 and 130, but Brookside, but it's very oddly shaped. Let's see if I have another map. And what this was an airplane factory. Was known as the Whitmore Ham Company, Jamaica Plain, Squantum, Saugus, and Framingham. This is from the Massachusetts Aviation Historical Society. And if you look at places, principal office and factory is 130 Brookside Avenue. At that time, the 172R Green Street was attached to the Brookside Avenue buildings. They still are. They're separate parcels now, but have same owners. So this was actually pretty prominent manufacturing of airplanes, and built all of 5 airplanes, the L1 through the L5. But it was, let's see, Boston from the air in a Whitmore Ham airplane, flying every day from Saugus Airfield. It started first at the Squantum Airfield, now Marina Bay in Quincy, and when they during World War I, when the U.S. Navy took that as a naval air station, they moved up to Saugus. I think I have pictures of the L2, and here it is, beautiful L2 with people taking pictures in the shadow in front. And here's another L2 being mobbed by people in the middle of a town somewhere on the North Shore. The L2 and the Whitmore Ham actually entered one of the prizes. Oh, here's the building from the front. You can see 172 172R is the brick addition on the rear, but the front is 132 Brookside Avenue, which was the address of Whitmore Ham. These are 2 separate parcels, but owned by the same owners, Carlisle Engineering, who own 4 or 5 buildings right along Brookside Avenue, and is still being used as industrial, as you can see by the as the industrial, what is that? Not the front end loader. Anyway, the machinery on the street. They go up and down between their buildings on the street. Anyway, Whitmore Ham entered the Boston Globe Prize for the fastest round trip between Boston and Atlantic City in 1919. And the Whitmore Ham airplane won handily, very, very nicely, won a $1,000 prize. The fellow who came second after the race flew back to Atlantic City and was lost over the ocean. And the pilot, let me see his name, Walter Hodgson, forfeited the first prize and gave it to the widow of the pilot who was lost, and accepted the second prize instead. So it was known as a very, very powerful machine and very safe. And Whitmore Ham did did very well, but built only 5 airplanes and then went out of business. The more prominent brick building on the left is the carriage factory I talked about before. This is the Alfred Tanish carriage factory where they made carriage wheels and carriages. How should I say? I think this is a beautiful building. It's on our tour. A beautiful 3-story building with granite lintels and granite sills. Granite garage doors for bringing the carriages in or out at that time, since modified. And you can see a lot of, it was a very prominent artist's studio location for many, many years, and now has changed ownership, as you can see with the construction. Beautiful arched brick arched windows on the 3rd floor. Probably the factory was on the 1st floor, and in the basement, offices probably on the 2nd, and Mr. Tadish and his family lived on the 3rd floor. This later became a prominent, what can I call it, underground nightclub called Spectacle, that moved from the South End to Jamaica Plain. And when we took our tour of this one Saturday, the garage doors were open, and they said they still had the hubs of all the wagon wheels in the basement for the carriage factory from Mr. Tanish. But Spectacle is closed, and this has been sold, but the building remains. Here it is. Oh, beautiful. I really do think it's a beautiful building with the lovely cornice, lovely modest, and great use of brick and granite. And again, the next door, Whitmore Ham. There it is. Principal office and factory, 130 Brookside Avenue, Jamaica Plain. Dr. Whitmore was a dentist from Cambridge, and Walter Ham was the chief engineer, and Melvin Hodgson was the pilot who gave up the winning Boston Globe Prize. Let's skip across the street and now move to 177 Green Street, a beautiful, modest 2-story brick building built about 1896 and known as the Patrick Meehan building. I think it has a daycare in the 1st floor. On the 2nd floor, it used to have a prominent architect's offices. They had since expanded and moved downtown to Boylston Street. And I think, yeah, and built some very prominent buildings in the Boston area. So a lot of still prominent uses of this lovely 1896 Green Street building. This was built, I think, by Joseph Cahill, and was used as a store and bakery for its first use. And presumably the family lived above that. Let's see if I can move to the right. Yeah, so you can see the 2-story brick building on the left. Then we move to a 3-story brick building, all owned by Patrick Meehan, of course. And that would be 160. Nope. Nope. Oh, sorry. I've lost my place here. Anyway, so this is the 3-story brick building with the travel on the 1st floor. A beautiful building, again, built by Mr. Patrick Meehan. And if you look carefully, there is a plaque between the 2nd and 3rd floor. This one is blank, so I don't think I have a close-up of it. So we're not sure if it was an apartment building or he just liked to put plaques on all his 3-story and 4-story buildings. To the right of that is an older building. That is the 165 Green Street. That's much older, before the war, probably. Possibly 1849 to 1854, although we're not sure if it had to be rebuilt when Stony Brook passed below it. Here's a lovely close-up of it. Very modest two-story brick building, probably before the Civil War. I can't really see them building a wooden building in 1900, 1902, but it is possible. To the right, you can see Brookside Avenue extension, where Stony Brook still runs underneath. So this is the corner with the maps. And if you look carefully in blue, you can see Stony Brook running right where Brookside Avenue extension is now. And then if you look carefully, it runs under that little wooden building, yellow, and then runs to the back to the back of the Alfred Tanish factory. You can see the dotted lines, perhaps. And then it curves back across Brookside and becomes open again in blue. Little hard to see, perhaps, but that's why they think that the yellow building had to be either moved or reconstructed when Stony Brook went through it. Here it is in a much older map. This is curved, of course. Green Street, tilted. Green Street is on your right, and the railroad is along the bottom. You can see Providence Railroad, and then Amory Street is just above that. Amory Street is named Glen Street on this map, and Brookside Avenue is named Cooper Street. Cooper, of course, is a barrel maker. So very industrial names again, but you can see Stony Brook was much more meandering, and it had practically a lake where the Papineau livery stable was at the time. Then it goes under Brookside again, meanders back and forth along the railroad. Here's a picture of it, by the way, when it was culverted and put straightened and underground. The opening to the right, the smaller opening to the right where the tributary comes in, is about 8 feet high. So these are huge culverts. We're talking 13 to 16 foot diameter for these for Stony Brook in this area. And this is right under Amory Street. And it even gets a little larger further down. There it is again on the other side of Green Street. Now we're switching back. So Green Street is along the right. The railroad is along the top, Jamaica Plain Station. And you can see Stony Brook running along what is now Brookside Avenue extension. That's before the Sturtevant mill was built. I think our next picture has the Sturtevant. Yep, there it is again. So the Sturtevant blower works, the mill building that's still there, or partially still there. You can see Stony Brook ran right below the mill, and the mill actually built on top of it because the Stony Brook was there. That's after it'd been straightened. You'll notice it's much straighter on these two maps as opposed to meandering on the other side. And you'll say, well, what wasn't it meandering? And I think, oh, here's the Bartlett block. Okay, if you look carefully at the lot lines, I'm not sure if you can see it, the lot lines are not square and gridded here. They're curved above Stony Brook. And that's because that was the original route of Stony Brook in its meandering shape. So when they straightened it, they did not straighten the lot lines, interestingly. So when people bought parcels of land, they had to buy them with curved edges matching the old historic Stony Brook. And here's a close-up of it. You can see the curve, and the blue dot is a building that is there now that I'm going to show you in a moment. So keep your eye on the blue dot. The edge of the lot line is curved there. Now that's 1874. This is 1890. Again, no building on the blue dot, but they built, Patrick Meehan has built a building along the Stony Brook, but curved on its edge to match the lot line that he purchased. That's 1890. 1896, suddenly there is a building at the blue dot, but it has a diagonal edge to match the Patrick Meehan building and lot line. This was owned by the Old Colony Railroad Company, as you can see it there, because the station is right across the street. So we have a building that was built to match a brook that was no longer there. And in 1890, that's 1896, and here's the building still standing. It was Bikes Not Bombs, now Jameson and Thompson, and it's named Bartlett Square after the owner who owned this area, whole area. And you can see the diagonal edge relating to nothing, except it used to be a brick building right along the edge that it had to match, and now the brick building it had to match is no longer gone, is no longer there. So there are two ghosts that this diagonal edge obeys. One is the building that was there, and then that building was matching the old Stony Brook, which also hadn't been there when it was built. Here's a close-up of the front, Bartlett Square, and you can see the diagonal corner. So this had many uses. Built first for the Old Colony Railroad, and then I think Hanson Construction, but Hanson's father had it as his construction headquarters. Then Bikes Not Bombs. And then it was a soap factory in between. And I think there's still a sign for the soap factory. Here's the other side of the same building. It looks nice and square on the Amory Street extension side. But if you look closely at the entrance, I think I have a close-up. Yeah, there's Jameson and Thompson, and right below it is Consolidated Soap Company. So another ghost of the past. So this building follows two ghosts on its backside and has a ghost on the front. Now we'll move down Amory Street Extension to the large mill building. This was the B.F. Sturtevant Company. Sturtevant Blowers, they were the largest industrial fan company in the world, and their headquarters was here in Jamaica Plain. Mr. Sturtevant came, I think, from Maine with like 50 cents in his pocket, got a job pegging shoes. Shoes were put together with wooden pegs, and he had a lot of trouble with the sawdust in the shoe pegging factory. And to save himself, invented an industrial fan that would get rid of more sawdust than anybody else. And he kept on working and working, and as I said, had the largest industrial fan company in the world. Branches in Philadelphia, Chicago, and London, England. But his office and works in Jamaica Plain. Oh, here's a picture of Mr. Benjamin Franklin Sturtevant, prominent, our largest mill owner. Here's a picture of the factory when it was much larger. You can see it's it's three different brick factories. Had some fires, and the front two portions have come down, but the back portion still exists. Along the railroad, of course, because it needed it for freight, both in and out. Mr. Sturtevant lived on Sumner Hill, and his daughter married this fellow, Eugene Foss, and he built him a nice house on Everett Street as a wedding present for his daughter and son-in-law. And so they both lived on Sumner Hill overlooking the factory. Mr. Foss took over the Sturtevant Works when his father-in-law died and expanded it, and then moved down to Hyde Park, Reedville, where this large Sturtevant factory was built. People know this as the Westinghouse Works because it was sold in the 1950s. Sturtevant Fan was sold in the 1950s to be a division of Westinghouse. But the old building still stayed in Jamaica Plain after he built that. And in World War I, they did, in World War I, they worked a lot on air conditioning and ventilating Navy ships. And then they went into air conditioning for home use. So here's air conditioning. And some people think it's the first effective use of air conditioners. Mr. Carrier of Carrier Air Conditioners claims the title, but Sturtevant beat him by several years. Again, in World War I, the old factory in Jamaica Plain started making airplanes. So here's our second airplane factory in this industrial section of Jamaica Plain. Aircraft wings in the Sturtevant manufacturing plant on Amory Street, 1919. So during World War I and just after, they started making airplanes, and they called them the Sturtevant S for Sturtevant. Here we are. Here's the Sturtevant biplane. And I think it is a metal fuselage. It was the first metal fuselaged airplane in the Navy. After they made airplanes, they switched to automobiles. This is the Napier automobile. So this is our second automobile factory in the Green Street area. Napiers are a British brand, very well known. And the American Napier factory was in Jamaica Plain. Here it is, American Napier on the bottom right. So we have two automobile factories, two airplane factories, and a series of very entrepreneurial immigrants. Oh, this is the way the building looks now, Commerce Center. And its present uses, of course, it's called the Jamaica Plain Commerce Center. Its present uses are Ethos is in it, Bottom Line College Counseling, the Justice Resource Institute, and Infrared 5 is also there, a software company that makes games, prominently Brass Monkey for all you gaming folks. Right across the street is the railroad, which will end our Zoom tour. This was the old station when it was at grade, and all the roads, Green Street bumped over the railroad. To make it safer, they raised the railroad on a stone embankment and made all the roads go under the railroad. And I think I have a picture of the new Green Street station. Oh yeah, much bigger, 22-foot high embankment with the stairs leading up to it. And on the left side behind the double platform station, you can see the Bartlett block where we've just come. And on this side to the right starts the Wolsey block, which still is named that as we lead towards Center Street. And I think that concludes my talk.
All right. So I have a few questions from you, Michael, if you so wish to answer them. There's a few about the hotels, McKinley and Morris. So when were they built? Are there images without the enclosed first floor that they have now? And then also, well, why don't you do those two and then we'll do another one.
Okay.
So the dates of the hotels, and do we have pictures where they're sort of in their
Yes,
glory?
I think it's the 1890s. Let me look it up. to get it right. And I haven't, let's see if I've seen some pictures of that. Okay, sorry. Okay, so the first one is 180. Nope. Should be an odd number. Here we go. Okay, I'll get it. All right, come on.
While you're doing that,
Sure.
there was a question about hotels, and that's sort of a misnomer. It wasn't a hotel like the way we think of it today, where you check in at a front desk and rent a room overnight. They were apartment buildings, more or less. So, but it was just a fancier one.
There,
French
yeah,
flat apartment, right?
we're guessing that there were mostly apartments. Yes, permanent apartments. There was some guess that they might have been also had some short-term use for people who didn't have a guest room, but were coming to visit. But I don't think they needed two hotels to do that. Let's see if I can find.
There's a long lost building on the other side of what's now the Green Street Station, where Elizabeth Palmer Peabody lived and died. That was also called a hotel, but it was really a fancy apartment building. Probably today we would call it concierge living.
Yes. Okay, why don't I find this? Of course I can't when I wanted to. Okay. Here it is. 181, 187 Green Street. That's the one on the right, Hotel Morse. Date of construction 1890. And the builder was George Cahill. He built both, I think, and he also built the 172 rear Green Street, I think, the airplane factory. Let's see if I can see what else he built. I don't have that. Okay, and then let's see, Union. The other one has a Union Street address, Union Avenue address. And I think it's built about the same time. Okay, sorry. My. Anyway, 1890, and I'm guessing 1894 for the other one. I'll look it up.
Then while you're doing that, the other question about the hotels is about that we have such a lack of single room occupancy housing in Boston, and it seems to be being phased out. Are there plans for the future of those two buildings?
Not we know of. They seem to be doing well. They're legal SROs. You need in Boston, you need a lodging house license to run a lodging house. And we have about 6 permitted lodging houses in Jamaica Plain. Those two, the old Bowditch School is permitted. And then there are 3 or 4 row houses along South Huntington Avenue in the first block that are mostly used for people coming out of prison for transitional housing, like number 8 and 12 South Huntington Avenue. Anyway, and if you're a dormitory, we used to have a good amount of fraternities. Sorry, in Jamaica Plain, you need a lodging house license for a fraternity. But let's see, I don't see too many pictures of the hotels without the extensive alterations for the first floor. No.
I think you can kind of see them in the background of my picture. Oops, I'm pointing the wrong way. I can't do it backwards.
Right.
And they look pretty enclosed, actually. This picture I'm in front of is 1906. Okay, moving on. Somebody wants to know about the Stony Brook. Can you see it these days, or is it completely covered?
It's completely covered in a culvert. Sorry, in a culvert. Well, I shouldn't say that. Anywhere in the urban areas. It starts at naturally, what's known as the Stony Brook Reservation, which is the second largest park in the city of Boston. That's up on the Hyde Park, West Roxbury border, sort of Washington Street and West Roxbury Parkway. And that's the high point. By the way, that's the Bellevue Hill, a high point of the city of Boston. So it starts up near the top of the mountain. Turtle Pond is its source. And then it runs openly from Turtle Pond in a southerly direction away from Boston, then makes a enormous U-turn, and then runs northerly right along the railroad. It's open and visible in Stony Brook Reservation, runs into a pipe right at the border, and never to be seen again, except for these little clues that we point out on our Stony Brook walk. Like Brookside Avenue runs on top of that. That gives you the name. Also, we have a Stoneleigh and a Brookley Road, Stoneleigh Brookley, and Stony Brook runs right under the intersection of Stoneleigh and Brookley.
Great. Let's see, what's next? What was housed in the Bartlett building?
Oh, the Bartlett block, there were two blocks. When it was a railroad, mostly at grade, there were commercial buildings on both sides of the railroad. On the Center Street side was the Woolsey block that we talk about a little. That's where the post office started, the first major post office in Jamaica Plain. And then on our side was the Bartlett block, which was wooden. And it was also real estate companies, grocers, bakeries, and things like that. I think it's Alden Bartlett. It's not the Bartlett of the Bartlett pair. That was Enoch Bartlett. He's buried, by the way, in Jamaica Plain at Forest Hills. But this was Alden Bartlett who took over, bought the land from the Jacksons and then from a fellow named John Ashton. So he owned all the land around that before selling it to the Old Colony Railroad and then Patrick Meehan. But it was a general commercial building.
Thank you. Many people are commenting it's a great presentation, which I would totally agree upon. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks.
For hyper local history. There's somebody who's asking about the 3 Fernald wooden house buildings from the 1850s. What's the name of the person that built those?
Well, it's Joseph Fernald.
Okay.
He's the builder.
Oh, wait, I'm reading
He's
two
the
different
builder,
questions.
not the owner. I
Okay.
don't know who owned them, but he probably was the owner as well. Joseph
Fernald, Fernald.
F-E-R-N-A-L-D. Yeah.
Okay.
Which
And
I
then-
assume is a French Canadian name, like Papineau. Papineau is a very prominent French Canadian name, by the way.
Yeah, and then somebody was asking, they were built about 1850. It looks like something out of an A.J. Downing cottage style, like
Exactly.
book.
Exactly. Yep. With the art, with the gables. And what else? Yeah, Mr. Fernald has built others, and I think they have more ornamentation, sort of Gothic revival ornamentation barge boards that you see around. So they might have had those originally. His others built at that time in Cambridge have them still.
Somebody's asking about 430 Amory Street, so a little further afield from where we went, which was formerly Oban Electric and then became the Pony Express Moving Company.
Yes. I wonder if he's asking about the back building on Brookside. Yes. Let's see. Let's see if I can. See if I have a picture of that still. Okay. All right. let's see, I think I have a picture of it someplace. This one here. So this is the back of the open electric building, and faces on Brookside right across from the Tannish carriage factory and the Whitmore Ham automotive factory. And the thought is this might have been, it has the right date and it's prominent enough, it might have been a gatehouse for the Stony Brook. But I haven't found any documentation for it, so I didn't bring it up besides just taking a picture of it in case the question came up. And also, if you look at the maps, it has the right date when Stony Brook was there, but it's 3 or 4 parcels away from where Stony Brook ran. So Stony Brook ran behind the Tannish factory and then in the northwest direction. And this one is a little southwest of the Tannish factory. So it was never really on top of Stony Brook to be a gatehouse. So it's doubtful, but there is a possibility that's a Stony Brook gatehouse.
Okay, there's a lot of chat coming in through the Q&A, which is a little hard to go through. Somebody wants to know when Amory Street got its named. They seem to think that it was called Glen Street before it was named right.
Yes, the map had it as Glen Street. That's the only time I've seen it as Glen Street. It's confused. It's confusing because there's the Glen Road. There are 2 Union Avenues on the maps. More prominently, you'll see that section of Amory Street called Boylston Avenue. It had, so after Glen Street, it was named Boylston Avenue, just enough to confuse people with Boylston Street. But Amory Street came down from Columbus Avenue, Center Street being old. The first part of Amory Street is old until Boylston Street. And then it was Boylston Avenue south of Boylston Street. And then finally became Amory the whole time. I don't know the dates. I can look it up in one of the documentation, but it is confusing. But I had to research a house for somebody who was built, who had lived on Amory Street, and I had to go back to when it was called Boylston Avenue.
Okay, somebody's asking about the corner of Amory and Green, so where Bartlett Street condos and the Evergreen Eatery is. What was there? Was there anything?
That was in my memory, was a 2-story wooden building, commercial on the first floor and apartments above 1 story. So it's nice that it's commercial with apartments above still. There is a picture on oil on canvas painted of it in Mr. Fowler's real estate office. And he offered it to me to donate to the people who Evergreen Eatery and people who are running the business now, but they didn't seem to want it. But you can see an old picture. Why it had to be demolished was during the construction of the Southwest Corridor, that was not taken, that building. But to save money, this is very esoteric, to save money on the Southwest Corridor, they did not dig as deep as they intended. So instead of 5 miles digging 25 feet deep, they dug for 5 miles, 23 feet deep. And that saved them an enormous amount of money. But what that required was the streets that go over it, like Green Street, had to be raised in a very slight crown. And they thought putting the entrance of that building below sidewalk level was not safe, so they demolished the building later on. And you'll see when you drive along Amory or more prominently Lamartine Street, you sort of do a roller coaster effect when you come to every crossing. And that saved, I don't know, $50 million or something. Yeah. Inside.
Abby?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna end with one more question, just in the interest of time, and I know everybody has Zoom fatigue, but we're excited that you could be here today. When did 172 Green Street stop being a factory?
Oh, it was changed. No, there were factory uses and woodworking. I think Watermark was actually there as a woodworking factory. And it converted to condos in 1999, 2000. Yeah, and yeah. And by the way, our prominent resident there is Andrea Cabral, the former sheriff of Suffolk County and Secretary of Public Safety for the state. And now I think she's a commentator on WGBH and into the cannabis business. Yeah, she lives there. She lives there still.
All right. Okay, so we're going to end it there, but thank you everybody for coming today, and Michael for an amazing presentation. Many comments coming in about that.
Good.
We recorded this. We will put it up on the website shortly. Sometime this week it will be up, and it will be on the homepage in the latest articles section for a good little while. So you'll be able to find it, and you can tell your friends who live nearby or who might have lived nearby to come and check it out. Thank you, Michael. It was great.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody. See you in February.